Good morning, everyone. All right, this morning we're going to talk about detachment, really. The name of the lecture was actually What Gives, because I was reading a couple of weeks ago, a Buddhist monk said that detachment is equivalent to giving. And that set me on a lot of thinking, and I was going to share some of that today. But I want to start with our usual poem from Hafiz. It's called The Theater of Freedom. There's a few pieces in here that I'm going to use to kind of launch off into things also. In the Theater of Freedom, in my divine studio, what I have been working on is this: painting the truth, revealing a more realistic picture of God, tearing down the cruel walls that separate you from the tenderness of fire. Someone must be withholding the crucial lines in all those stories that you have heard of our friend, for there is still too much fear and pallor upon your cheeks. And I rarely see you in that marvelous theater of freedom. Hafiz knows you could not describe him even if we sat side by side on a caravan for years. Even if we slept close in my desert tent and you became familiar with that holy scent that the sun and my master leave whenever they visit me, for something has happened to your youthful passions. That great fuel you once had to defend yourself against becoming tamed. And your eyes now often tell me that your once vital talent to extract joy from the air has fallen into a sleep. All that you could ever say of me can only describe my camel's tail and that coarse hair that is barely visible sometimes on the left side of the moon's nose. In my divine studio, where I'm sitting right now, crafting your heart, your lyre, and your flute, I long for the day when you will join me in knowing that extraordinary humor and all the enchanting realities of the infinite performances of God. It's a beautiful poem, and I love the idea immediately here in the very first line, what I've been working on in my divine studio, because that really describes to me what spiritual practice is, what our spiritual life is. It's our divine studio where we're painting a more realistic picture of the beloved, of the divine, trying to figure things out, exploring different ideas, testing different colors and textures on this canvas of our life, trying to come to a truth, to an understanding. My gosh, what is going on here? What is this incredible experience of being alive, and what to do with it, how to properly live it, be it, expend it, express it? What can possibly capture the wonder and experience of this, the mystery of this being? He talks about tearing down the cruel walls. And this is such a delightful way of talking about it, because sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that our religion, our practice, our discipline, that those are the cruel walls, those are the things that box us in. And really, that's such a beginner's perspective, isn't it? It's such a way of getting lost in the rudimentary aspects of things and not being able to fly, not being able to understand the freedom of this divine theater. But something is withholding a few crucial lines from us, he says. And that is speaking to this whole notion that all that we've heard, all that we've listened to, all that we've been studying for all these years, we still haven't figured it out. There's something missing. There's an element in that recipe that we haven't quite figured out what is needed yet, that certain pizzazz. And he gives us a little bit of an indication of what it is here, that it's a little bit of fear. There's still too much fear and pallor on your cheeks. And that's what we're going to talk about partially today, is what is that fear comprised of? What are we afraid of? And what is the nature of what we're holding on to? Why is it that knowing the truth, we can't see the truth? Why is it that with all of the information that we have, with all the sages that have pointed at this divine presence. Why is it that seeing we can't see and that hearing we can't hear? And he says, yeah, it's true that it can't be described. You know, you could go on for years trying. And he says you could only describe a camel's tail in comparison, that you're just not going to get there. It doesn't exist in a form that can be described. And we don't want it to be described. We want something infinite. We've got eternity to be. How do we want something with limited aspects that can be described? We want something that's going to spend eternity. We want something that can fit the size of our soul, that can fit, that can give an adventure to a limitless self. Yes, indeed, that's what we're going after here. And he says that right now in his divine studio, he's sitting there and crafting your heart, that the divine is right now at this moment crafting your heart, creating that piece of art through which he can express himself, through which that infinite can become expressed. So like Thakur, we can dream of becoming a whole through which God can be seen, becoming a whole through which inspiration flows infinitely with an amazing amount of power and an amazing amount of transformation, not just for us, but everything within the reach of that light. And that's our goal, to reach this extraordinary humor and all the enchanting realities of the infinite performances of the beloved, the infinite performances of the beloved, those things that he has in store for us to see, for us to experience. For the divine, our day of realization has already happened. What is time to the beloved? And so that's very much why the first thing in a Buddhist practice they tell you is that you're not sitting in order to reach enlightenment. You're sitting to understand that you're already enlightened. That is our very nature. This delusion is so temporary. And in the measure of infinity, in the measure of eternity, our deluded time will be like our childhood when we're 80. It will seem like a distant past that was almost insignificant, except for the slight mark that it leaves on a memory. And that's what we're going for. We're going for that freedom, for that divine laughter, for that divine joy of being beyond anything to be afraid of. Now, Vivekananda gives a wonderful talk when he discusses the immortality of the soul. And he starts with this paragraph that says about the soul, it is not the body, neither is it the mind. The body is dying every minute. The mind, it's constantly changing. The body is a combination, and so is the mind. And as such, they can never reach to a state beyond all change. All right. Here are two of the biggest clues. It's not even a clue. He gave us the answer right here. He says it's not the body. The body is already dead. You know, just like Arjuna heard from Krishna in the chariot. All of this battle's already fought. The body is dead. It's gone. So we're just waiting for that reality. So your answer is not in your body. So why do they say the wise then don't invest in the senses? Because it's dumb. In the words of Swami Prabhupada, it's dumb to invest in the senses, to go look for your enjoyments in the world, in whatever form that is. And no matter how much you've justified them, it's dumb. It's not only dumb, it's not wise. And your nature is wisdom, your nature is wise, which is why it never feels right. It never quite settles. It's a good distraction, it's a nice whirl on the swing, but it's never satisfying in the long run. It always leaves you in the same state from when you started, and that is always hungry for more. And so he's saying right there immediately, it's not in the body, so be wise. Sit and let that soak in. That's really what a large part of our meditation is letting these obvious truths become apparent to us. Let these ideas of what oneness means soak down all the way through all of the different associations of the mind and the heart, so that we get an inner understanding, an understanding that's authentic, that's integrated into our self, into our idea of what we are in that sense. And he says it's not the mind. Now, this is a tricky one. And in my own studio, as it were, of the divine, this is really where I've been playing lately, is trying to sense the self before mind. And I'm following a practice that the Buddhists recommend as part of my work on it. There's a lot of other things swirling around, but just that notion of breathing, of feeling the breath and not letting the mind tell you about the experience, not letting the mind tell you about yourself, not letting the mind set the stage even for the experience, but to completely shut out the mind by neti neti, not, that is not me, that is not me. And what's very interesting is the mind is quite tantalizing in the way that it does things. Often there's the gross level of just plain thinking, where it just gives thoughts to you, images to you. But there's something much more dastardly to me than that, and that is these subtle states of being that the mind convinces is you. You know, frustration or moodiness or anger or fatigue, these different things that don't have an image, they have a feeling, they have a disposition attached to them, they have a frame of reference attached to them, and they affect the way that the rest of the thinking appears. And not just the thinking, but the experiencing appears and gives you a wrong idea of yourself. So he says this body is a combination. And why does he say that? Because he taught us many times that anything that is composed must decompose. So anything that's made of parts eventually comes apart, is what he's saying. But beyond this momentary sheathing of gross matter, this momentary experience of having this somewhat clumsy body, you know, caked around an immortal soul that we go thudding through life with, that we often complain about the neighbors upstairs making so much noise with. He says that beyond this momentary sheathing of gross matter, beyond even the finer covering of the mind, is the Atman, the self. So something beyond mind. Now, I'm going to keep putting an emphasis on this because we are addicted to thinking. And our detachment has everything to do with that addiction. It's fundamental to our addiction, fundamental to our detachment. You see, because your idea that you are thinking and that you're thinking your thoughts and that your thoughts are relevant to you is the clinging that's preventing us from seeing the truth. Quite often, when we talk about detachment, we talk about external objects. But see, that's talking in ignorance because your mind is external to you. So it's not something that's outside of mind that is external. It's not something that's outside of body that is external, which is usually where we try and do all of this work. And to no real great effect, really. Only in the beginning does that have any meaning. But the real battle is within, where you realize that the body is outside of yourself. That is the reason that you can sense it, that you can perceive it. Anything that you can perceive by necessity is outside of you, is not you. And so this idea of detachment goes much, much deeper than just not buying that new Mercedes or not having that fourth piece of cake. You know, that this sense of detachment comes down to your personality, comes down to your states of mind, comes down to your moods, comes down to thinking, to analyzing, even to this worldly idea of learning, not the idea of gaining wisdom, which is something quite different from that. He says that here, that beyond this momentary sheathing of gross matter, beyond even the finer covering of the mind, is the Atman, the true self of every man, woman, and child, every being, the permanent, the ever free. Now that's a statement. If that is you, he has just described you as ever free. So what is it that's preventing your freedom? It's your identity with the mind and the limiting adjuncts. You know, when Hafiz mentioned in his poem there that he was longing for the days before you had been tamed. What is it to tame something? It's to bring something under limit, to bring something under control. And your infinite free self has become under the control, under the limitation of the mind, because you've adopted it as being yourself. So when it says you're in a bad mood, you're in a bad mood. When it says you're hungry, well, then you're miserable. When it says you're in pain, well, then you're suffering. You have come under its sway and you have identified with it so closely that you can't let go. And you've done it for so long that you don't even realize you're doing it. You don't even see it anymore. And when it's presented to you, the first thing you're going to feel is fear, because you have become so comfortable in its caress and in its constant attention and in the idea of being limited and small, something conceivable. You've become so comfortable of that idea with self that when your infinite nature first begins to flash before you, you're going to react in terror. You're going to be terrified because you cannot imagine something so big, something so free, so something untethered, uncontrolled, untamed, as it were. It is his freedom that is percolating through the layers of thought and matter, and in spite of the colorings of name and form, is ever asserting its unshackled existence. It is his deathlessness. It is his bliss. It is his peace. It is divinity that shines out and makes itself felt in spite of the thickest layers of ignorance. He is the real man, the fearless one, the deathless one, the free. This is what it is to be detached. That is a description of a man or a woman or person who has detached, who has let go of these ridiculous ideas of being a man or a woman of certain ages and proportions and colors and sizes and statements and educations and moneyness and social standing, these absurd, thick and clumsy ideas of what you are that you have gathered so closely around you that they have solidified into a body that's limited your directions to forward and backward and up and down. Now, freedom is only possible when no external power can exert any influence. What are those external powers we're talking about? It's the body, it's the mind. Those are the two primary powers that are exerting an influence over our delusion, that are creating this idea of being stuck. That when the body calls, we jump up to serve it immediately. When the body gets tired, we look for the nearest place to lay down and coddle it with blankets and pillows. When it gets hungry, we go and look for its favorite foods in the largest quantities we can manage ourselves to convince to eat. This is our bondage, our constant slavery to this mind and its moods and its pettiness and its jealousies and its angers and its hungers, and this body with its clumsiness, its pains, its aches, its demands, its constant need for maintenance. This is your bondage. This is what has tamed you and taken away that youthful joy of a free soul, to become like children, to play in the world of being, free and unencumbered. That you are. That is our nature. That is what Swamiji is trying to tell us. And it is only possible to find that space again when you stop putting yourself under the influence of these external things to you, the mind and the body, fundamentally. Freedom is only possible to the being who is beyond all conditions. Beyond all conditions. Now that's a statement of fact in two ways. One, Swamiji has already stated that you are free. He's already stated that your nature is free. So somewhere in you, in this forest of delusion, there is a self that is already in that state, who is beyond all conditions. And you can start to find that because it's implicated every time you recognize a condition, because it is the one that recognizes bondage. Your free self is the one that knows when bondage is around. because it's free, because it feels the opposition. That's how you feel anything, is because it's in opposition to you, even at the gross level of the body. You feel things because they're opposing the skin. These ideas, this opposition. And so, for it to be opposing something, that something has to be there. So, all of this bondage, you intrinsically know your freedom because you can sense the bondage. You intrinsically know movement because you know stillness. You intrinsically can see a busy mind because you know tranquility, because you know what it is to be beyond mind. But that's not what we pay attention to. We pay attention to the dancing colors, not to what they're indicating. And why? Because we're convinced that we're the senses, and that's all the senses can do. They cannot actually see themselves. We talk so many times about what Swamiji says. I've mentioned it again and again, even to my own self in practice. I mention it all the time. And here I still sit, a dumb, deluded body before you. This notion you cannot see your fellows. The child who says to Swamiji, Swamiji, is there really a God? And Swamiji bends over and says, yes, my son, it is. And he says, well, why can't I see him? In the innocence of a child asking. And Swamiji says, have you ever seen your face? God is like your face. You see, so that's another huge clue. Such a huge clue, it's not even a clue, it's the answer. You know your face by its implications. Your face is implied, though you will never see it. You will never see your face. You will see reflections of it, and just like this whole world is a reflection of your very nature, your very self. So we're very accustomed to reflections and to identifying with reflections. But we need to become accustomed to being what we are before the reflection, that inner self. The Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, that's a Buddhist scripture. How's that for a name? The Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch says that detachment is a central concept in Zen Buddhist philosophy. One of the most important technical Chinese terms for detachment is Wu Nian. Now, I'm sure having never heard that word spoken, I'm sure that I have grossly mispronounced it. But this word literally means no thought. So detachment, in the one Buddhist sense, is the idea of giving, which is interesting because here the word is being associated with the Chinese idea of no thought. This does not signify the literal absence of thought, but rather the state of being unstained by thought. Therefore, detachment is being detached from one's thoughts. It is to separate oneself from one's own thoughts and opinions in detail, as to not be harmed mentally and emotionally by them. You see, this thing is, when you contemplate the world and things around you, you at some point will come to know and suspect that everything is merely a thought, that you've never encountered anything but a thought in all of its many forms. And when you begin to understand that everything that you've ever experienced was only a thought, then you can go about the work of making them equal in their effect. Since they are only thoughts, they are nothing else. All the other qualities that you've given them and that you've been trained to assign to them are also simply composition of thoughts. Just thoughts. Any state of mind that you're in is just a composition of several subsequent thoughts that put you in a good mood or put you in a bad mood, that made you angry or that made you jealous. They're all just thoughts. And your mind is only capable of one at a time in your consciousness. So it comes down to that. We mentioned that earlier in the week in a vlog, that it comes down to just one thought at one moment at a time. That's all you have to manage. That's all you have to. It's like an action movie. These horribly violent action movies, they're always entertaining in one sense. It always seems like the hero only really has to take on one person at a time. Even if there's like a room full of 95 swordsmen, it's going to come down to him just dealing with one at a time. Nobody is ever going to come up behind him while he's in the process of taking care of another one of them. And oddly enough, that's the truth of our existence. That this huge problem that we've created around our life, around our spiritual development, around our spiritual education, around this opening up to wisdom, we've made such a big deal out of it. We've made such a huge conglomerate of it. And it's really just down to this moment and this thought. If you can learn this skill of not storing up thoughts to become composite statements of being, composite statements of disposition, then you don't have to accept weakness. You don't have to accept your karma. You don't have to accept its effect on you. That is only part of the story. That story, which is just a long line of one thought at one moment at a time until this present, stored in a mind that has become an attic of weight for your expression, an attic of stored up stuff that has become things that you have to worry about getting rid of and taking care of in yourself. So he's saying here, practice detachment. What is this detachment? It's knowing the separation that already exists. You don't have to create the detachment. Detachment is merely a coming to understand the fact that you're not the body, you're not the story that is what you think you are and who you are, that it's not your thoughts about the present moment. It's not your analysis of spiritual life and your understanding of God and the philosophy pieces that you've collected up until this moment. It's none of that. So in this moment, do not consider them. That is not the way. Swamiji told us that in the very first two sentences. It is not of the mind. It is not of the body. So do not look there for it. Do not look there for it. Now, does that mean we don't do anything with the body and mind? Well, good luck, learning to ignore the mind if you don't do anything with the mind. That's where we have to use one thorn to take the other thorn out. You have to discipline the mind. That's the whole reason for ethics, the whole reason for morality, is to get the mind in a state where you can get a moment's peace to start doing some detachment, start doing some discernment, to make enough room in your mind to think a worthwhile thought. to come out of the clouds for just a second so that you can catch a glimpse of the sun. That's what all of the practice is about. All of the you can't do this and you should do this, you shouldn't do that. In and of themselves, they're utterly unimportant as things. They belong to a mind that will burn up and blow away into the unity in the end. Non-existent, none of it's there. There's one without a second in the end. So it's not that they're important in and of themselves. So don't use them in the wrong way to beat yourself over the head, to create shame, to create, pain, to create disappointment, to weaken yourself. Don't use the thoughts of the mind to do that, sitting there bemoaning the fact, and I catch myself doing it. I love to talk about my age, as you all know, as I watch myself grow every day older. At 55, I sit there and I look, what have I done? Why am I just as stupid now as I was when I was 5? How come I haven't learned anything of the beloved? How come I don't know anything in the real sense? How come it's only what people tell me? That's the wrong way to think. That's using bondage to create bondage. That's why Swamiji says, use your mind to tell yourself of your freedom. Use your mind to bring it down to this one moment with this one thought and express freedom. Insist on your freedom. Insist on the fact that you are not bound. And so don't do the stupid thing that's being presented to you in the moment, that's being longed for by your body, that's being longed for by your mind. You are not bound to their needs. You are not bound to their demands. They do not have any inherent power whatsoever. All of the power of your body over you, all of the power of your mind over you is your power given to the mind and given to the body. And that power that you give is your attachment. It is your thinking, it is you that wants that piece of cake. It is you that wants to be angry. In fact, inside, anger is one of the worst sufferings that we can go through. Your body, your mind, your free self is begging you not to be angry. It's begging you not to be out of control. It's begging you not to give in. That's how we know, because we feel the pain of doing what we actually do not want to do, of succumbing to the things that we actually do not want to succumb to. That is why they call it freedom. That is why they call it bliss. Because in the end, you will realize you are only becoming what you are. That it was not a restriction on what you thought you were. It was letting go and flying, letting go and soaring. This is the whole idea. Ramana Maharshi, we've talked before about his practice. He says the practice is giving up wrong ideas by refusing to give attention to them. Where are these wrong ideas happening? In a mind. And how are they being presented to you? Through the voice of your mind. And how do you deal with them? Don't give them any attention. What happens when you don't give them any attention? You don't give them any power, because you're not attaching to them. You're not identifying with them. You're not giving a very key element that is necessary for attachment. And what is that? Me and mine. If you have a thought in your mind and you just look at it and let it go, it will be harmless. No matter what its subject matter is, it will be harmless. But the moment you add your ingredient, your magic ingredient, me and mine, that's my thought and it represents me, that's where this dance begins. This dance of doom, as it were. Because the more you connect with your body, and the more you connect with your mind, the more you will be convinced of your death, and the more you'll be convinced of the pain of your decaying body. And old age will, in fact, be a misery, because it will be your mother sitting there slapping your hand over and over and over and over again, trying to get you to let go. And you won't be letting go. And who wants to be sit there being smacked by mother over and over and over again? That's the best of old age for somebody attached to a body and a mind. So let go. So mother doesn't have to sit there and smack your hand over and over and over again. He said, it is only wrong ideas that separate us from the full awareness of our natural state. That's it. It's no bigger than that. It's no bigger than that. One thought in one moment. That's all. Ramana Maharshi, realized soul. It is only, that means nothing else. It is only wrong ideas that separate us from a full awareness of our natural state. And what is that natural state? How did Swamiji describe that up there? It is his deathlessness, his bliss, his peace, his divinity that shines out and makes itself felt. He is the real soul, the real man, the fearless one, deathless one, ever free. All right? The only thing standing between you and what you woke up thinking you were this morning, and freedom, described in such beautiful terms, is wrong ideas. You've, in that one idea at the one moment, you didn't stop paying attention to it. You said, "Oh, that's my idea, and it describes me perfectly right now. I'm tired, and I feel old, and my body hurts, and I want some oatmeal now, and I need a cup of coffee." As soon as you accepted that, you put on this whole heavy, gloomy coat of conditioning, and you have to spend the rest of the day there until you don't. Until you hear the mind making a demand, until you recognize the body weeping in demand, and you become uninterested, and you don't pay any attention to it, and you become aware of the self that's being implied by that recognition, a self that's ever free, ever pure, ever blissful, and doggone happy. Shift from the world of thoughts to the feeling of being. There it is. That's not, these clues aren't even clues. He's just telling you point blank, black and white. Here it is. Shift from the world of thoughts. You are addicted to thinking. You can't stop thinking. Every time you want to know something, you go ask the mind, how am I feeling? Now you go ask your mind, what do I like to do? Well, you go and ask your mind, Oh, what do I have to do today? You go and ask your mind, your mind, your mind, your mind, your mind. And you are deluded because of it. Running around and scrambling for make-believe things in a make-believe world. A world you know nothing about because it's not the mind and it's not the body. So stop asking the mind how this moment is and experience the moment. What does that mean? That means that you don't sit there and do any analysis about it, because anything that you can see, anything that you can perceive, including every thought in that head, is not you, does not define you, is not what you are. Do not hear them. Open up everything and experience the moment. No cognition, no ideation, no analysis, no summary, no sensuality, just wide open to the indication of an ever free and ever pure self. That is what the scriptures call surrender. Surrender is becoming uninterested in your thought by not paying attention to it and being completely open to the ever outward shining of consciousness, of Sat Chit Ananda, that self that radiates through you into this world outside. He says, just keep quiet and Bhagavan will do the rest. So there ties in with our whole idea of devotion. You see, our devotion is for our own self, but as long as we see ourselves as separate and apart from that self, that devotion is to the beloved, to God, to our dearest ideal, which in the end becomes our marriage, our union. We return to ourselves, as it were. And God is the bigger aspect. God is very real. It's not the God portion of devotion that's unreal. It's the devotee portion that is unreal. And it's only unreal to the extent that it thinks that it's separate and apart, you know, to that idea. So he says, just keep quiet, calm the mind, and the beloved will do the rest. That's what this universe is for, possibly. At least one place it's described that way. This universe is meant to bring you out of delusion. Yeah, that's not even controversial, even if you want it to be. This universe is meant to bring you out of delusion. How? Because it hurts. Anytime you push against truth, anytime you push against your Satchit, your qualities of Satchitananda, as it were, anything having to do with love, intelligence, and existence, anytime you push against any of those three, the result is pain. That tells you that the point of this universe is not for you to stay here. The point of this universe is not for you to remain separate, not for you to remain alone in ego. This universe is conspiring to your enlightenment. That which is fighting it is your delusion and fear of letting go of what you think is yourself, of what you've mistakenly called me and mine. So he says, just keep quiet, let Bhagavan do the rest. So you're not in a condition that you have to panic about. You don't have to get into an alarm and then suddenly create a whole other whirlpool of thinking that you have to learn to become uninterested in. You don't have to. Your means of letting go is to give it to Mother, give it to Bhagavan, give it to Thakur, give it to God, give it to Jesus, give it to Buddha, give it to somebody. Don't hold on to it and beat yourself over the head with it. Don't define yourself by your memory, your presumed memory. He says, this shifting of attention is the ultimate act of surrender. That's exactly it. You want to know how to surrender, this is how you do it. Stop paying attention to the cognating mind. Open to the moment, to the existence of the beloved. I tried something just the day before yesterday, and it was quite startling how it struck me. Instead of praying to God, I prayed to the moment, because I've gone on and on over the last year or so about the I am, that God is this present moment. And I realized that I was even saying that as if this present moment was something external to myself, and God was still remaining out there. And then I realized, no, God is this moment. God is my very isness. Just the very fact that I can do any of this is God. And so I prayed to that fact. And it was very interesting to pray for in the moment for success in the moment. It brought an intimacy and an immediacy to the experience of the beloved that I was quite startled by, quite taken back by. And in my mind, I made the mistake of thinking I had discovered something. And of course, what does that do? Immediately creates ego and the forgetfulness of what you've discovered. So it's quite a dastardly little puzzle that we've put together for ourselves here, quite a trick that we've designed for ourselves to get out of. But the way to get out of it is to duck, to walk around it. Don't engage it. Once you go to war, you've lost. I have that theory about my own mind. It's like if I start fighting against one of my desires, I've already lost. Because my mind, if I just said no and walked away, there's no fighting. And why can't I? It's me. It's my thoughts, my body, my mind. I said no. And if I can't say no, that's because I don't want to say no. And if I don't want to say no, it's because I'm deluded, right? So if you go to war against your desires, you have already lost because you've given them power to go to war with you. So the thing is, let your no be no and let your yes be yes. That's authentic living. That's being what you are. Don't put the gray areas in there that give you permission in very subtle ways to continue your delusion. Because that's why you go to war. You go to war to lose. When you sit there and say, no, I'm not going to eat that piece of cake, but you sit and you keep looking at it and it becomes a struggle, right? Once it becomes a struggle, the only purpose of that struggle is for you to struggle long enough to validate the fact that you lost, but you tried. Then you can eat the piece of cake, feel bad about it, but say, well, at least I tried. I really put up a good heroic effort for it. That's nonsense. You knew from the beginning you were going to lose that battle. That's why you created the battle. Because you have the power to say no and walk away. My friend Gary, I won't give you his last name, although I usually slip up. My friends hate it. But my friend Gary, lost 85 pounds one time. And how did he do it? One of his friends bought him a big cake. And he called me and he said, I am calling you because I want to be accountable. I'm taking this cake as I'm speaking to you on the phone and I'm putting it in the trash can. And I hear it fall in the trash can. And then he goes over and he says, I want you to be witness auditorily that I am now pouring coffee grinds from this morning's coffee machine over the top of the chocolate cake that I just put in the trash can. That's how you lose 85 pounds, my friends. You don't take that cake, even though it came from a friend, and sit it on the counter and say no to it continuously for the next week. That's not how you win this battle. You say no, and then you do the necessary. That is how you subdue an unruly mind. That is how you take down the fence of conditions that has caused your delusion, caused your suffering, caused your loneliness, caused all of your pain. That's how you do it. He says there's two things that we have to acknowledge. Okay. Well, actually, before that, he says that worship and devotion are aids in this effort. Okay, so that's where worship and devotion come into this. Worshiping your highest ideal, that's keeping your ideal true, keeping your ideal clear before you. Your ideal is not to be a slovenly cake eater. So you put the idea of God, your perfect self, before you. Your idea is to be free. Your idea is to be healthy. Your idea is to be blissful. And we devote ourselves. What is devotion? Devotion is surrender. You devote yourself to something greater than that, than your idea of self. So your devotion really is just surrender. To the degree that you surrender to your beloved, you are devoted to your beloved. If you think that you're devoted and you're not surrendering, you're just sentimental. There's a big difference between devotion and sentimentality. If there's no renunciation in your devotion, you are deluded. You are not devoted, you are sentimental. Devotion is won through renunciation, defined by renunciation. So your devotion and your worship of the beloved will bring you to the ability to not pay attention to to thought, to not be defined by mind, and not be defined by body. There's two further indications. He says, nothing that is understood or believed is of any use. Mental activity is counterproductive. Okay, that's the second half of that statement. It's not a matter of beliefs, and it's not a matter of anything that you think you understand. Why? Because those are mind. And the first sentence that we read from Swamiji, it is not in the mind, it is not in the body. So coming up with good philosophical descriptions and understandings is not where it's at. As a matter of fact, he says here, Ramana Maharshi says, it's counterproductive. You're just going into another spin cycle. You haven't found your way out of the washing machine. Yes. So it's not a matter of beliefs and not a matter of understandings. He says that those are counterproductive because they further increase the idea of being the mind and that the answer lies in the mind. It does not. Acceptance of the idea that all striving and all notions of attainment are futile and illusory. Acceptance of the idea that all striving, because you can say yes and you can say no. This is that entering into the battle here. This is the joke you're playing on yourself over and over and over again. All striving is illusory. All notions of attainment are illusory. You are already that. When Swamiji described yourself at the beginning, he described it as ever free and blissful. Ever free does not mean once bound. Ever free indicates that you are free in this moment to be what you are. To be what you are. And it is only the conditions that you are holding on to by splitting your power with them and giving them control over you that they have tamed you into a little box of delusion, a very small sense of I that is born and dies, that feels pain and suffering, that longs and hurts, when in fact, you in there are free. You in there are free. There is no need for striving. And Mother indicates this also, because I mention this all the time too, because she told me, I can't believe it. I mention it all the time because I'm startled by it every time. You can have your enlightenment this very moment if you want it. That is the Holy Mother's words, the Divine Mother. You can have your enlightenment at this very moment if you want it. You have all the power. You have all of the strength. You hold all of the knowledge. It's the things that you are divvying it up to that are preventing you from being, that are preventing you from being free. Ramakrishna goes on here. He says, discrimination means to know the distinction between the real and the unreal. God alone is the real and permanent substance. All else is illusory and impermanent. The magician alone is real, his magic illusory. This is discrimination. This is discernment. If it's changing, it's not you. That's how we throw the mind away immediately. Nobody has an unchanging mind. That mind is constantly changing, constantly conditioned, constantly presenting conditions, constantly demanding more conditions. And once it's got all of those conditions met, it will come up with a whole string of other ones that you haven't met. That's why life goes on with lots of busyness and little accomplishment, because we're running after something that cannot be caught once we're running in the mind, once we're trying to build realization through a mind. Can't be done. It's counterproductive. You are that already, open to that, Stop thinking about it. Discrimination and renunciation. That is the married couple that you got to get to know right there. Discernment and renunciation, right? That's the whole source of devotion and worship right there. Discrimination means to know the distinction between the real and the unreal. Renunciation means to have dispassion for the things of the world, things that are not real, right? That shouldn't be hard to do. It shouldn't be hard to do. If you had a stereo made out of paper mache and somebody stole it, not such a big deal because you knew it wasn't real. Everything that you think you have in this life is paper mache. Every idea you have of yourself is paper mache. It's fake. It's unreal. There is no substance to it. That divine self within who beholds all of this paper mache world, that alone is real. That alone is real. And you can experience that in this very moment by not paying attention to mind, by not paying attention to body, opening yourself completely up with no demand and no cognition, and simply feeling the radiating self of being. That which is indicated by all the limitation around you. That which is indicated by all the movement around you. That which is indicated by all the change around you. Renunciation means to have dispassion for the things of this world. One cannot acquire them all of a sudden. They must be practiced every day. Now, if we had been doing this right from the beginning, that wouldn't be true. All of our work is to undo the mess that we've created, right? That's all of our work. All of our work is because we have got so many bad habits and so many wrong sets of ideations to work ourselves through, to separate ourselves from, and to come to the understanding that we are not them, and that they've divided us and are counterproductive in our sense of bliss and being. He says we have to practice that all the time. Why? Because we've engaged in them all the time. And if we're not engaged in countering them, we're engaged in reinforcing them. That's the disappointing circumstance we've created for ourselves. That's the difficulty we've made up for ourselves here. So we have to work every day to get out of it. We have to counter it because we've spent so much time devoting ourselves to it. We have to counter it with at least as much time, right? We have to counter our unawareness with at least as much awareness in order to become constantly aware. One should renounce lust and greed mentally at first. Then by the will of God, one can renounce it both mentally and outwardly. It is impossible to ask the people of Calcutta to renounce all for the sake of God. One has to tell them to renounce mentally. Why? Because they would all freak out and run away. All right. If we make this thing big, you're going to freak out and run away. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, that's way too huge. Bring it down to one thought in one moment. Don't worry about the rest of your life, and don't worry about the last X number of years of your life. You've got this moment and this thought. Do what you know is right, and that is all it takes. One moment, one thought, one after another, to sainthood. That's all. Not big things, not huge decisions, not giant vows, no grandiose austerities. One moment, one thought at a time. Do the right thing. That's all. Through the discipline of constant practice, one is able to give up attachment to woman and gold or lust and greed. He's talking to a group of men. That is what the Gita says. By practice, one acquires uncommon power of mind. Then one doesn't find it difficult to subdue the sense organs and to bring anger, lust, and the like under control. See that? If you get this uncommon power of mind, which is the power of detachment in the one moment at the one thought at time level, if you can manage to keep your focus at that, to stop summarizing thoughts into bigger things that then affect you and overcome you, keep it at that one thought at one moment at a time. He says right there, then one doesn't find it difficult. One doesn't find it difficult to subdue the sense organs. If you learn to say no and mean it in the moment, that's all you got to do. Once you know that, it's not difficult, he says. That's one thing all the sages say, that enlightenment is not difficult. It's only us unenlightened folk that run around talking about how difficult it is. So he says, he goes on to say, and this is for the householders. He says, he who leads the life of a householder should devote 15 parts of his mind to God. Otherwise, he will face ruin and fall into the clutches of death. He should perform his duties of the world with only one part of his mind. Right. So it's not so much a matter of what you're doing. You're doing your duties in the world. You're doing what needs to be done. It's a matter of how you're doing them. Are you doing them in the presence of the moment, in the presence of your beloved? Are you holding your ideal out in front to shed light on whatever you're doing? You know, are you holding your ideal? Are you holding your beloved out in front of you to light whatever you're doing, so that you can see clearly, so that you can enjoy this world without getting caught in this world, without getting stuck? That is spiritual life, according to Swami Vivekananda, right? That is how we do this continually. And he says here, that's the word he uses, continually. Continually, it doesn't mean once a day for a week. It doesn't mean once a day, unless that once a day is 24 hours long. That's what continually means. All right. So if you have a notion that you do your spiritual practice 1 hour a day, that's your first problem. You do your spiritual practice 24/7. And what is your spiritual practice? To keep the beloved's light out in front of you to shine on whatever it is that you're doing. Whether you're practicing piano, whether you're writing a program, whether you're emptying the trash, whether you're starting a fire, whether you're punishing your child. All of this is done in the light of the beloved. That's your spiritual practice. One moment, one thought at a time. Do it right. There's an idea in Stoicism of apothea. Now, we think it's apathy because that's the English word that's rooted from that word, but it's not what it is. But it brings some interesting light. And this comes from a different direction because they're not much on the idea of God as such. So, apothea, he said, in Stoicism, the idea of apothea refers to a state of mind in which one is not disturbed by the passions. All right, very similar to the idea of Ramana Maharshi saying not paying attention every moment here. Best translated by the word equanimity rather than indifference. Okay, so dispassion is not indifference. It's not being subject to. It's freedom. You know, but this freedom is very different from indifference. The meaning of the word apothea is quite different from that of the modern English word apathy, which has a distinctly negative connotation. According to the Stoics, apothea is the quality that characterizes the sage. The Stoics thought freedom from all passions, sought freedom from all passions. It means eradicating the tendency to react emotionally or egotistically to any perceived external events. Okay, to react emotionally, that's to give your power to something, to a thought or to a set of thoughts that's trying to set a disposition on you. Egotistically is attaching the I in there, that it's offense to the I, or it's a desire of the I, or it's a need or a want of the I. That's putting the egotism in there. So their idea of this apothea, this idea of equanimity, it's eradicating any tendency to react to a thought presented to you in the moment. No reaction. No reaction. Why? Because everything is an outgoing. Everything is a manifestation. How do you know that? Because everything else passes away. There's nothing to get. You can't take things in. Things don't come in. The things of the self only go out. You're a shining light. How do you know that? Because you're going to die, and all the things you collect aren't going with you. So you spent your whole life doing what was counterproductive. If you're spending a life collecting things, collecting ideas, collecting children, collecting anything, you've got the wrong idea. You've been told from day one you can't take it with you. So do you think the point of life is to collect a bunch of stuff you can't take with you? Life is to give. Dispassion, detachment, is giving. They are equivalent. So he says here, for Stoics, it was the optimum rational response to the world. It made the most sense to give, to not be attached. The Stoic who performs correct virtual judgments and actions as part of the world order experiences contentment and good feelings. So this is detachment. This is what gives. Your very nature is to be that light. If you attach and hold on to things of the mind and things of the body, you've got all kinds of conditions and you become calcified. You become limited, defined, stuck, small. You suffer. The only logical response to living is to give and to give and to give again.